Hi, everybody, and welcome to Friday Night Flock Talk. I'm Robin Sullivan of the Leather Elves. It's good to be here. I have the usual reminders, introductory nonsense. You can like the Leather Elves on Facebook. That way you get notifications, hopefully, when we go live. You can check our Facebook page, the Leather Elves Facebook page, to catch surprise sales and pop-up events. You can follow the Leather Elves on Instagram, and you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. So there's a lot of ways to find us. And hopefully, if a topic catches your eye, you'll be able to tune in. We want to thank all of our sponsors for the Rockstar Tour. Nick is, I'm stressing Nick out because I keep adding them, which is wonderful because we're getting more and more support. But these are our sponsors for this 2025 tour. Please take some time to support them. They're supporting aviculture, they're supporting the avians in our lives. And so if you can support them, that's a wonderful thing to do. We're working on an interactive map for the tour. We're leaving, knock on wood, we're leaving the end of July, the last week in July through August. And we're going to do an interactive map so that you can follow along with us and hopefully meet us on tour. We're working on a shirt, and there might be some surprises if you meet us on tour with your shirt on, surprises for your birds. The last thing I need to do is it's this weekend, our spotlight rescue is Flight Club Foundation. They are they're going to be the end of the tour for us. We're super excited to see all the wonderful things they do. Flight Club Foundation is also doubling as a sponsor as World Parrot Expo. So this weekend, any boxes purchased for the Flight Club Foundation will be doubled. So that's kind of a good deal for them. One other thing, I lied. There was one other thing. Our topic tonight is a tough one, and I really do appreciate Dr. Anderson for being with us. But I want to remind everybody who's listening, making comments, things like that. It's not a forum for bashing any specific facilities, organizations, stores, individuals, rescues. That's not going to happen here. We all know that there's unethical things going on out there. But this isn't the place to call it out. This is the place where we talk about solutions and how to make things better. So, okay, now I promise that's the end. I need to introduce someone to you. We are very lucky to have her with us tonight. She's on the road, but she's still able to be with us. Dr. Rachel Anderson is our guest. Hi, Dr. Anderson. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing good. So I'm going to read your bio and I have to read it because it's pretty impressive. And if I squint, it's because I didn't wear my glasses. So Dr. Anderson is a vet in Southwest Florida at the Animal Hospital of Bonita. She originates from Kansas City, home of the Chiefs. How was that? Was that good? There we go. Okay. That was tough for me, I got to say. Dr. Anderson double majored in animal science and philosophy, which is a really cool thing. We need to talk about that at some point, at the University of Missouri. And she continued on to veterinary school at the University of Missouri College of Veterinary Medicine. During her studies, Dr. Anderson served as vice president of the Zoo Exotics and Wildlife Club, president of the Shelter Medicine Club, and vice president of the Small Ruminants and Camelids Club. Additionally, she was selected to participate in externships at the Dickerson Park Zoo in Missouri, the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo in Colorado, and Oakland Zoo in California, as well as several private practices. Dr. Anderson moved to Florida, smart move from Kansas, I got to say, to pursue her passion of exotic animal medicine, including small companion mammals such as rabbits, ferrets, guinea pigs, birds, and reptiles. She currently serves on the board of the Calusa Herpetological Society. She's also passionate about helping with shelters and rescues, particularly Lees County Domestic Animal Services, Parrot Outreach Society, woohoo, shout out to Parrot Outreach Society, and Nan's Ranch. In her spare time, Dr. Anderson, how do you have spare time with all of this?
I love to have fun.
I need to learn the lesson. She enjoys playing tennis, hosting game night, teaching Zumba, spending time at the beach, and this is the one we need to like take advantage of, I think. Belting out karaoke. She is kept on her toes at home by her fiance and her two fur babies, Miko, a husky mix, and Scotch, a lab mix. So, did anybody else notice out there that she mentions the names of the dogs but not the fiance?
It's a dog. Well, his name's Cooper, so sometimes he
Oh,
gets confused as a dog name too.
got it, got it. So, how are things, Rachel?
Things are good. Things are good. I'm at Animal Hospital of Bonita now in Southwest Florida. So it's been amazing there. It's a larger team than what I'm used to, but that's exciting. I really like kind of larger vet practices. Oh, when can I come to Texas? I don't know. I looked at Texas too, and I was looking at all different places to live. Somewhere with heat. Yeah, definitely. Um, but it's been great. This transition.
All right. So, all right, I'm going to ask the question that I like to ask everybody. What's your first bird memory?
Okay, so my grandpa and my aunt have historically been really into birds. So my first bird memory is kind of boring. It's with my grandpa and giving his son Conyer a bath named Reggie. And that wasn't really that fun because I didn't get to touch Reggie or do anything with her. She was not like a nice bird. But
Mm.
then second memory is more fun. So my aunt, she's really amazing. She was a trainer at Marine World for birds in California for many years. And then she started doing shows in Kansas City when I was a little bit older. And going to one of her shows for the first time was like so cool. You know, they were singing happy birthday, they were playing sports, like they were doing all different cool sorts of things, her flock of birds. And so, yeah, that I think is a better, more fun bird memory.
That is fun. So she was at me. Was she at Marine World Vallejo?
I'm not sure. It was when I was before I was born, and I think maybe when I was really, really young. I'm not sure on the exact dates, but
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Oh, that's fun. I know a lot of people who got their start in birds there. So I have to go back to this comment. Can we go back to that comment from Bella? Yeah, Dr. Anderson is an amazing vet.
Ah,
She saved my green wing and has seen many of my birds. She's a phenomenal vet. So you've got the endorsement of a former Flock Talk interviewee. I'm just saying. Um,
and she been
Thank you, Bella.
amazing too.
She
Yes.
is pretty amazing. Nick says yes. Well, it's the Marine World is Vallejo. It's in his county. Okay, so when you and I were talking before we decided to do this, we talked about the cost of vet care and why it's so important. So what do you think people need to know about that? Because it's not, I mean, I think people sometimes go, oh, it's ridiculous, it's expensive. Let's talk about that.
So, my opinion might be a little controversial. Not every vet agrees with me on this, but I think owning animals is a privilege, not a right. And so, if you're choosing to go into this, know that it's not just this one time fee. I mean, this applies for not just birds, but any animal. A lot of people will spend so much money on the upfront costs and they think, oh, it's done. I paid for this animal and we're good now. But it's a lifelong commitment for whatever the lifespan is of that animal. And when you're talking
Mhm.
about birds, that's even more so than, dogs and cats of it could be your entire life that you have this animal. So you really, really need to have a plan in place of how you can afford vet care and how you can afford all of the rest of their basic needs. There are certain things that can help you, like pet insurance, care credit, people that apply for that, that can really help them. But I would say if you're wanting to get an animal, think of that first. It is so easy to fall in love with animals. I mean,
Mhm.
they're cute, they're fun, they're interesting. That's not the hard part. The hard part is really not picking between different breeds, different species. Like, that's all really fun to do. The not so fun part is to sit there and look at your financials, look at what's your average time you have in a day, all those sorts of things, and see if you actually are ready to have that animal.
Yeah, I think that's so important, and it's people say, "Oh, well, my bird's at home all the time. I don't have to take it in for." I know it's fine. It's eating fine. It looks fine. It, I mean, what's okay? So, what would you suggest? This isn't directly on topic, but it is. What would you suggest about regular care? Like, what's so for any somebody that has a companion parrot, what's a
Mhm.
normal expectation as far as going to the vet is concerned?
I think that doing it annually once a year is ideal. If it is a senior bird, then you might be looking at 6 months or 3 months going in that time scheduled. And if you can do yearly blood work, especially if it's a larger parrot, I think that's good care.
Yeah, I agree, and, like Bella brings up a good point. It's so true. It was an unexpected $4,000 emergency for Chance. So Chance is her
Hmm.
green wing. And
Hmm.
I think that's something, Melissa is a fantastic, she listens all the time. She's a great trainer, makes cool bird toys. She's a great companion parrot owner. Zora has an appointment next week, and the quote is like $500, and it's a well bird check. She does it once a year. But I know that Melissa is so dedicated to that care of that bird that she saves up when she knows that's coming up, and it's part of her budget to know that she's going to do that once a year. um, so yeah, Jennifer says she now asks her clients if in 6 months this bird needs $4,000 surgery, would you be willing to and able to pay for it?
Ooh,
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, Jennifer ups the
yeah.
bar. Jennifer and her husband are sponsors on our Rockstar tour this year. They make some really cool toys, and Jen does a lot of consulting. And I think that's a pretty fair question. Um, so Dr. Anderson, we were talking too about um, choosing an avian vet. Why is this important?
So, in vet school, a lot of uh, future veterinarians get very, very little training on birds. Um, I did have some people that were helpful. My large animal anatomy professor, Dr. Brian Papier, he's very into chickens, so we got good lessons on that. I have our pathologist; he was into exotics, but University of Missouri did not have a true exotics department. So a lot of that I had to seek out myself at the zoos, at private practices, at all of these different places. And then going into private practice, initially I was doing only exotics. So I got tons and tons and tons of hands on experience. That could
Mhm,
be very, very different than the vet that you're walking into that advertises that they see birds, but maybe they've seen like 10 birds ever. And there's just a huge difference between someone that's seen hundreds or thousands of birds and someone that has, maybe sees one once every 2 months or so.
mhm,
Um, so it's just really important to know what you're getting into with your vet. Some things that you can look into to try to scope it out a little bit. You can ask the practice of, what percentage of exotics do they see? How many birds do they see on average? You can check and see what continuing education the vets there have done. Have they attended Exotics Con or AAV conferences? You can see if the vet is an AAV, Association of Avian Veterinary member, which my membership expired. So I need to renew
but
that.
don't always
Don't come too close. That's good for me to remember. But just is this something that they are willing to see, or is this something that they see regularly and are passionate about? And kind of a little bit with my first point of when you're picking out a pet, some people don't have access to a good avian vet in their area. I was just with some of my vet school friends who are in what I'll just call the middle of nowhere, Missouri. And so sometimes they do see stuff like that and they're not super experienced, but they're doing the best they can. And those people are doing the best they can because they just simply, can't drive 6 hours for this thing. Um, But if you're in a place, especially a larger city, there definitely are good avian vets, so try to find them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember, I had a Kayik and I didn't have an avian vet. I didn't know all this. I didn't look into it first, any of this. And, which I should have done all this homework, but I didn't at the time. It was a long time ago. And I found this vet that said, yes, she would see, a bird. That was fine. So I brought him in and we were talking and, I turned she was gonna get him out, just to do an exam. He was in a carrier, and I turned to pick up my purse, and I turned back around and well, I heard that horrible Kayik scream, the "I'm being murdered" Kayik
Mhm.
scream, and I whip around, and she's got him, like, squished up in a towel and clearly had no idea how to towel a bird appropriately, n and she's like, "Oh, well, we're gonna do a blood draw," and I was like, "Oh, is it gonna be are we gonna do is it gonna be voluntary? Because let me take yeah, I said, "Do you see something wrong, or is this just what, for routine?" And she said, "Well, it's for routine." And I said, "Oh, well, you know what? I'd rather take him home and work on a voluntary blood draw before we do this." And she started to giggle. And I kind of looked at her and she said, "Well, a voluntary blood draw on a parrot? That's not possible." And I went, "No, yeah, it is. It's a lot of work, but yes, it is." And so I then said to her, because I was speaking at AAV that year, and I said, "Oh, are you going to AAV?" And she said, um, "No." She said, "I need more work on my small mammals." I'm thinking, God help the small mammals because this is you're better with this than you are with small mammals. So yeah, it's really important to look into these things. Um, yeah, Melissa said she checked out one place they didn't even know what a kayik was. Yeah, that's a no, absolutely. But all of those things are important, and especially when we're talking about things like PBFD,
Mhm.
which I'm the initials PBFD, they just kind of roll off the tongue, Psittacine Beak and Feather Disease. And that's, obviously that's what our focus is tonight. Nick, Nick's got some pictures and we're going to play a little game first before we get started because this is about the only happy thing you can say. So what about this bird? Comments, yes or no. Do we think this is a healthy bird or a bird with beak and feather? Just throw it in the comments. This African gray eating his carrot. He's a feathered mammal. He is. Um, okay. I'm not getting you guys aren't like participating. You usually participate more than this. We'll go to the next. So this is a healthy bird. Okay. So we know what that looks like. What else we got next, Nick? Please. How about this guy? What do you think? Healthy, not healthy? Laurie McFarland said the last one was healthy. You were correct, Laurie. Um, Let's see. He appears healthy, but without a closer look, it's difficult. Oh, that's so true, Adrian. And I forgot to do the disclaimer at the beginning for Dr. Anderson. There will be no diagnosing birds online tonight. Healthy, looks like a typical. This is not a Timna, Olivia. This is a conure. No, I'm teasing you. Okay, so most of the time, a vet that sees some birds will be enough, but when your bird's in critical condition, an expert avian vet makes a difference. So we've got this healthy. That is. I'm sorry, Nick. We can go back to the pictures. We've got the healthy conure, and then who have we got next? Okay, so healthy or not? I'm gonna hope that you all know the answer to this one. This is a photo courtesy of Tony Silva. This is a bird that is suffering, and I use the term suffering from beak and feather. His nails look a bit longish. But this on the this guy, he absolutely is not healthy. He's a very sick bird diagnosed with PBFD. Um, who we got next? Nick. How about this guy? He's a cutie. Little sunny cutie there. There's even another picture of this guy, Nick. How about if we got that one? What do we think? Just our little friend here. Yep, that's on the eclectus. The beak was misshapen. The feathers were in bad shape. How about this guy? Hard to say, Laurie McFarlane. Anybody else? Probably sick. This little guy here tested positive for PBFD. And I want to thank the organization that shared this with us. They were willing to be very transparent, which is what we talked about with Shannon a couple weeks ago, transparency in disease management. So this little guy, unfortunately, was suffering from PTSD. PTSD,
Oh no.
PBF. Oh no, alphabet salad. Anyway, so we just put those up because we wanted to show you guys that it's not always easy. So, Dr. Anderson, what is PBFD?
So PBFD is a viral disease that was first discovered in cockatoos in the 1970s. Um, and it can affect pretty much any species of parrot, but it can also affect, I think, like doves, pigeons, chickens, other birds as well. But you will see it more commonly in budgies, lovebirds, lories, lorikeets, cockatoos, grays. And if I'm missing any, throw them out there because that's fine. Um, but it is a virus that can attack rapidly growing epithelial cells. And so that is why a lot of times you're going to be noticing these changes in the beak and feathers. I would say more commonly the feathers. They're going to look kind of like unkempt. There can be feather loss. They can just they've been described as like the French molt. If you wanted to Google it, is more of a classic look. And then the beak can be slightly more glossy, just like kind of frail looking, fragile, have cracks, things like that. Those are some signs that you can see outwardly that might indicate that a bird has beak and feather disease.
So Carrie Ellen just said ringnecks, and Bella said eclectus. Um, so is it a zoonotic disease? Is it something that it's not that, so
No,
we can't, we don't have to
which
worry
is
about
good.
getting,
Yay.
it is good.
Yes.
It's good, but that doesn't make it any less difficult. Let's put it that way.
Yes. Hmm.
So signs and symptoms. So we saw that little bird, the lovebird there, that was positive.
Hmm.
In looking at that bird, and I think, I don't know that there are a lot. I mean, this bird's playing. It's moving around the cage. It looks fine. What are the signs and symptoms that we need to be looking for as far as this is concerned?
Yeah. So, looking at the beak and feathers is important, but something that people don't realize is because it's got beak and feathers in the name. So you're like looking at the beak and feathers. Sometimes you won't see it at all. So that's something that can be really concerning. There are different versions. There's paracute, which is super fast, acute, and chronic forms. And so different species of birds can be more likely to be affected one way or another. And it also, what form they get, it also has to do with how young they are affected with this disease. So,
Hmm.
something that I really wanted to emphasize was lovebirds are one of the few types of birds that it's been reported that they've been able to like overcome it essentially, like not regularly by any means, but there have been cases where they've gone on to be basically fine. And a lot of times they don't show those classic symptoms. Now, other birds, switching over to African grays, sometimes they don't show that feather loss at all. And it can be either a paracute or acute infection, and they just die. It's one of those ADR sudden death birds. And you wouldn't know until necropsy and selecting tissues to send off that you would know, oh my gosh, this was beak and feather. So
Okay.
you definitely should be looking out if you see an unkempt looking bird, that should be something that's on your list and something to think about. But don't think that just because it doesn't have those signs that it doesn't have it, because that's not true.
So how do how did you test for this?
So the preferred test is a blood test, and it's called a PCR, which basically means that they're looking for just tiny little segments of DNA in the blood, and then they're able to take that and amplify that segment of DNA so that they're able to detect this virus. Um, you can also do choanal and cloacal swabs. So you can do like a little swab. I talked to the lab, Avian and Exotic ClinPath Lab. They're an awesome lab, and Rose, who's been running it, she's been doing it for over 40 years, and she said that the blood tests are preferred because there's less of a chance of contamination with those.
Okay. So with the blood test, and I had this conversation earlier today with Debbie Goodrich, who's out at in Auburn at Seattle Parrot. She used to run Seattle Parrot Expo. They've changed their name to World Parrot Expo. It's tough for me to get that out, but she asked me. So she's done the toe, blood from the toe,
Hmm.
but she's also done it. Well, she's had a jugular pull done blood test. Is one better than the other?
So I'm not sure that one is better than the other. Whenever I pull blood, I'm always going for the jugular. Also, a lot of times I'm going for like a larger sample than just this test. I might be running other blood tests as well.
Mhm.
Um, but you know, I
I
think
mean,
that go ahead, you're good.
no, I was just gonna say, I mean, it feels like a jugular pull might be less contaminated. And then Jen asked this question, would blood work show any signs that there's something wrong in birds that aren't showing any clinical signs?
Yes, yes. So there are signs, especially on what's called the CBC. So, kind of your baseline vet blood work is a CBC and a chemistry. The CBC looks more at the red and white blood cells, where a chemistry looks more at like your liver and kidney functions and those sorts of things. And there can be changes on the CBC of having like really low white blood cells, really low red blood cells, and you can also have really low platelets as well. So seeing those sorts of changes would be that your diagnosis of PBFD would be more likely.
Okay, so you do the normal, so it could come up in normal blood work, but if, I suspected for whatever reason, and I wasn't getting that response from my veterinarian, would it be smart to it's a separate set, right, to test, for PBFD. Am I right?
Hmm.
Okay.
Yes,
So
yes.
so it's not, so if a bird comes into you looking ragged, um, would you run that right out of the gate, or would that be a follow-up kind of blood test?
So it kind of just depends on the scenario. A lot of times it would be a follow-up blood test, but also when you get a history on the bird, knowing where it's come from, knowing, the circumstances, that can change a lot of things too. So,
Okay.
if someone just acquired a bird from a pet store, and it's looking like this, and I've also kind of heard of cases of this, then that might be a first go-to thing.
Mhm,
Somebody's bird that has been living at home with the same couple for 40 years and they don't touch other birds ever, and like I'm probably not going to run PBFD. It's also less likely. Most birds are going to get it around 6 months to 3 years.
mhm. Okay. So, Laurie says just another reason to have your birds vetted regularly. And it's true because you then see a pattern in blood work. You can see if, values are dropping or, if something's just not right. Um, so you mentioned a couple of scenarios. What's how does transmission happen? How does it go from one?
So Transmission is that is, I think, one of the hardest parts of this disease is that it's extremely transmissible, it's extremely stable in the environment, and basically, like any sort of secretion from that bird can transmit it. So it can come from fecal contamination, it can come from feather dust, it can like it's almost like what can it not come from that bird? So really, really any sort of particle, and you can get the particle on you, and then you go and handle another bird, or your clothes sit there. And some numbers that I was finding is that it can be stable in the environment for 2 to 3 years, but it might be even more than that. So
Mhm.
yeah, and especially organic material, it can live there just forever.
Bella said, if you have a bird come back positive that came from a pet store, is that something you would report?
So it's not a reportable disease. Something like chlamydia, you're supposed to report that to the state lab and the state veterinarian. PBFD is not one that you have to report, but it's definitely one that it's information that I'd be trying to spread awareness of to other owners. So just because you don't go to the state lab and let them know this, you want to tell bird owners and people thinking of acquiring birds or boarding or rescues, all those sorts of people, you want to let them know that this is going
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I was talking to another colleague and we were talking about Beak and Feather and we were talking about Dr. Branson Ritchie and how years ago he said he would not have a bird at home because he was working with PBFD birds and he could bring it home on his eyelashes was how he described
Yeah.
it. And like you said, it can come from dander. I mean, and it's not something that you're gonna just kinda Clorox it and be done with it. I mean, I think
Hmm.
that's the other thing that we can talk about. I didn't, when we were talking before, I didn't put it down, but I think it's something that we do need to discuss. So,
Hmm.
um, treat so, um, treatment once this is the diagnosis. Where do we go from there?
So you're not going to cure it. You're if you have this with your bird, I mean, like I said, there's like some little cases that I guess have overcome it, but at the end of the day, this is like you're not going to beat it. So pretty much, it's just going to be supportive care and trying to give that animal, as healthy and happy of a life as possible, if that's possible for you. Um, I've had cases of people that had birds with PBFD and they didn't have other birds and they loved the bird. And so they wanted it to live, as good of a life as possible for the time that it had. And I think that's totally respectable. I think that's totally fine. But if it's a bird and you have to kind of make tough decisions based on your other birds or other bird activities that you do, that's reasonable as well. So, um, pretty much it's just going to be supportive care. And the other thing about this is usually the birds that are PBFD positive, they don't die based on the PBFD itself. It suppresses that bird's immune system, and so then when they get any sort of secondary infection to bacteria, let's say, that's what ends up ultimately being its demise.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that's important. You mentioned we had a question. The percent. What is the? Do you know the percentage of birds you see that test positive? I
I
mean,
don't know a percentage. It's low. It's definitely low though,
yeah. I mean, I
which is
know.
good. That's a good thing.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And Jen says a good reminder to always properly quarantine a new bird before adding them to your flock. And Jen, I would take that a step further and even say worth testing. If you're bringing a new bird into your home and you have questions about, maybe where it's coming from or where it's been, because we don't always know the complete history of our birds. We don't know, especially birds that end up in rescue. We don't know where they were, what they were exposed to before. And so, my thing has always been better safe than sorry. And I think that's especially if you're adding them to a big flock. Disease testing is so important. Um, so, as far as recommending, do I wait until I see what's going on? Who should be looking for that? Like, you talked about people who, only have the bird in their home. They don't go to other bird things, whatever. Um, who should be concerned about this?
I think that if you have any new acquisitions or if you have a large flock, those are the people that I'd be most concerned about. Or if you are in that scenario where you only have one bird, if you are taking that bird anywhere else to get boarded, then you should also be thinking about this too.
And what kind of questions? So I noticed Karen Anderson is with us tonight. Uh, Carrie said she's had 8 in 20 years test positive. So Karen's on, and Karen runs a boarding facility. What kind of questions should people be asking Karen? And you guys aren't related.
So yeah, uh, you know, I think that it's the and it I don't know what Karen does. So this is not me knocking Karen or not. I don't know how she runs her facility, but um, if boarding places are able to require that they're tested uh, for infectious diseases before coming, I think that that is like the gold standard, the best practice. Not everywhere is able to do that, and not everyone is able to afford that all the time. So um, I'm seeing here of that they test their flock for 6 major diseases. That's awesome. Yeah, I would say definitely if you can, doing it for like Bornavirus, PBFD, chlamydia, polyoma, things like that. That's a great if you can do that. And if they're getting like that annual wellness by their vet, I think that that would
Mhm.
be an awesome set of standards and requirements. And if you're debating about different places to board your bird, ask about those qualifications because even if your bird is tested for those things, if anyone can bring any bird anytime, it doesn't really matter.
And I can tell you, I know Karen runs Avian Suites out in Minnesota, and we're going there on the Rockstar tour. But they do require, disease testing, and they're very good. Each bird family has a separate room when they come in, and so she's really good. When you say the gold
That's awesome.
standard, they are the gold standard for me in boarding. Um,
That's great.
so there was a question that came up, or actually, as far as, here's the question. If a bird tests positive in the practice, how do you make sure that doesn't get passed on to other clients?
So, what I think is the best way to go about this is um, if you already know, because some of these birds still have to get the routine checkups or they might get sick, and you might already know this bird is PBFD positive before it's even coming in. So we'll start with that. So you already know you're having a PBFD positive bird come in. So what I recommend doing is that on that day you try to have it as late as possible in your appointment scheduled so that your chances of having any sort of emergency bird come in are pretty low. And you also block off the schedule so you're not having any other birds come in that day. Um, another good thing to do is to have that person check in without their bird. And then you kind of do like a run in. Like everyone in the hospital knows this bird is coming in and it's running into the first exam room, and that's where they're going. um, then ideally you only have people like very designated people work with that bird, and ideally they don't have any birds at home too. Um, so you do whatever you need to do with the bird, and then once it leaves, you just F10 the heck out of that room, the heck out of yourself. Everything gets F10. Um, and you close that room down for the rest of the day for all birds, and you try to close down the whole hospital for the rest of all birds if possible.
Yeah.
So in the other scenario, which is harder to deal with, the bird comes in and then you find out that it has PBFD, I mean, that's trickier. And I mean, you can't always know because it might not be showing those classic signs. So then it's just
Mhm.
more about having good hygiene practices in general.
Yeah. I know Karen just said they will not allow PBFD birds to come onto the premises for boarding, and I
Yeah,
think that's
that
fair
makes
because
sense.
other people are, bringing them in. And it's Adrian just asked, is it possible to have a negative test, but the bird is still infected? So like a false negative.
Yes. So I'm glad you asked that. I have not been able to find great numbers. Everything says that it is a highly sensitive and specific test, the PCR testing is. So, exactly what you're talking about. Really good at getting true positives and really good at getting true negatives, but I can't find the numbers on that. And I've called a couple labs and asked, like, do you have the numbers of exactly how good it is at these things? And I haven't gotten that yet, but I think overall, PCR tests in general are really, really good at being able to detect the true cases and eliminate cases that don't have it.
And do you ever require more, or would you ever suggest testing more than once? So if you get a negative, you've got this bird that
Mhm.
is showing some signs and you're questioning whether that's something that's happening or not. You get a negative test. You do a test, the PBR or PBR, right? Test for, and it comes out negative. Do you do it
PCR.
again? PCR, I'm sorry. Do you do it again?
You can. You definitely can. I mean, because you also have to think there are so many steps before the test actually gets tested too. Like maybe you
Yeah.
got a kind of bad stick that day. Maybe, um in transport the UPS or FedEx like messed around and things got swapped. You don't know. Like there's so many steps to go from me with the bird in my hands getting the sample to that test going out and getting to the lab. And
Mhm.
so at the end of the day, I think it's fine to recheck. I think that's very unlikely that that's going to happen, but it could be something that's not an issue with you and not even an issue with the lab, but like unfortunately it's not a test that's run in-house. Like it's not something you
Mhm.
just do at the vet and then you get the results right then. You have to send it off to one of these major labs. So,
Okay. Bella says, "Is it a disease that flares? Isn't it a disease that flares? And if that they aren't flaring, could it come back negative?"
so I'm not sure what flares means in this context.
So if a bird has PBFD, there's not
Mhm.
is there like a high point of it if you were to draw blood or to do a test? Is there a high point or or could it be a low load of that in their blood? Does that make sense? I think that's
Oh,
what she's
yeah. Yes, I think that that could make sense. I'm really not sure about that. I think that because PCR is really good at just being able to detect just like tiny, tiny little amounts, um,
Mhm.
then you're usually good at that. Like
Okay.
you're usually going to be able to detect that in the sample that you get.
And so she just also put shedding here. So if a bird is positive, is in with other
Hmm.
birds, maybe before you figure that out, or um, do they shed that? Can they be positive and not shed the disease?
Probably not. They
Yeah,
probably are positive and shedding. Like we said before, though, they can definitely be positive, be shedding, and look like a normal bird, though. They can look just like your regular run of the mill bird.
right. Yeah, Douglas says in their aviary, a new bird arrival is tested, put in quarantine, and retested 3 months later. That's an amazing
That's
protocol.
awesome.
That's yeah,
Yeah.
really good. Um, so the importance of transparency, we've talked about that a little bit. What are we the ones I have seen wait, I lost it, Nick. just decline. We have Bornavirus. Birds can go in and out of remission. So with Bornavirus, yeah, but the ones with PBFD just kind of decline. That's unfortunate. But so transparency, sharing this information. Um, so there's a stigma attached to this, I would say, Dr. Anderson. I mean, do you agree?
Yes, definitely. Well, there's a stigma attached with, I'd say, like most diseases, most
Yeah.
things, because
Mhm.
you don't want to show other people that like your flock or your rescue or your store, whatever it might be, you don't want them to see any negatives. And especially with like the world we live in today, things can be taken out of context. You never know what people are going to do with that information. So, yeah, absolutely.
And I think, but I think it's so important that we are transparent. I mean, when you
Hmm.
think about how much you love your birds or you love your pets, whatever that pet is, you wouldn't want somebody else to have to go through what you're going through. And I think, how would you counsel your clients? What would you say to them as far as sharing this information?
I think that it's super, super important for people to share that they have this. Um, there was a client that uh, was in my previous practice that their bird had it, and they had kind of an awesome like social media account about it and just going through, what it was, but also some really like cute things of her bird as well. Um, but it just any sort of raising awareness that this is out there, I think is really beneficial for people to know. They might not know everything about it, and that's okay. But just knowing that this is a possibility, so it's something that people are looking for, I think that that's super, super important because, uh, like a lot of people I've talked about before, I wish that we could have some sort of service of an exam for vets before you get your pet. Like you come in and you say, "Hey, I'm thinking about getting, a gala." And I'm like, "Okay, well, look out for this and this and this." And they can get really hormonal. And like we talk about stuff before you get it. And I wish I could do this for birds with PBFD too of, hey,
Mhm.
this is something that might happen. So you really need to be careful and choosy when you're acquiring your bird, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think transparency is super important and having owners share their stories so people know that this is a possibility and this is out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as difficult as it is, I think it's something that we do need to talk about. And that's why, I wanted you to be on because I felt like I don't know about what you're seeing, but just on social media, I'm seeing an increase in this disease.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of and it's because of a lack of transparency that, we're not seeing, we're seeing more and more of it because there are pockets of it. And then a bird that's purchased at a place that has, reported cases of this, but didn't share with people, then ends up at a rescue facility or a boarding facility. And then a bird gets adopted from a rescue facility. I mean, it's this endless chain and it just keeps growing. So yeah,
Hmm.
I think that transparency is important. So we had a question here: do bird shows require testing in order to bend? In my experience, they have no. I'd be terrified of bringing home a bird from a bird show, but it seems like people attend them in order to buy new birds. We're seeing in most places there's a decline in birds being sold at events like that, and there's usually the ones that I've gone to. There have been vets, that are there, and if somebody brings a bird in, they get vetted, but it's just a visual. So, I mean, Dr. Anderson, have you seen any, events vetting birds before sale or no?
I've never been to a bird show, quite honestly, so I do not know if they have requirements for that or not.
I don't I mean, anybody out there that can comment, but I know the ones that I've been to have not, don't have that they have, like I said, a visual. There's a vet there that looks at them and says, "Oh, they look okay. Do you have your most recent vet records? Okay, here you go." That's a huge thing to be aware of and ask the questions. I mean, if you are at an event like that and you're buying a bird, ask the question, has this bird been disease tested? Has it got this? Has it got that? And go through the list. That's that meeting you want to have with people before they get their birds.
Mhm.
It's unfortunate. So Nick says that in his experience with national bird shows, the environments have been immaculate, and I have to agree with him. It's very well run, very clean. Um, but yeah, and Avian Suites does warn people about attending bird show events and ask those questions. I mean, it is so very important. Um, so we talked a little bit about what to do if you get this diagnosis. Is there anything, how do people safeguard against this? Just best practices? I mean, is there anything they
Mhm.
can do? Oh, so what would if you were to give them the quick, bullet list of what to do and the do this and the don't do this, what goes in
Mhm.
those bullet points?
So for this disease, number one, you got to know where you're getting your bird from. No, do they do this sort of testing? Okay, so check mark that. Then number two, bring it to the vet, get your own test. Why not? You might as well do that. Number three, quarantine it from all of your other birds if you have other birds. I personally like 30 to 60 days, but that's not in lieu of testing. That's just so that you can see if it exhibits any sort of signs, of other things too. So I'd say that's front end things. And then back end, sort of, oh no, this is a problem. I mean, like I said, you're going to have to make those difficult calls. Are you going to keep this bird? Are you going to have to depopulate your whole flock on the extreme end of it? Like, you're going to have to make those decisions. And then also, like I said before, F10. I love F10. Use it. It's not scary. I've never seen any person or like animal that I've worked with have any sort of reaction that I've known about to it. Make sure you're diluting it appropriately, though. It's a 1 to 100 solution, but just use that all over. And I had a really great toxicology professor who I'm going to mess up this saying because it's hard, but would say the solution to pollution is dilution. So it's all about clean, clean, clean. You might not kill everything, but if you just try to clean things as much as possible, that's very, very helpful. So F10, bleach, those are great.
Mhm. And there is one I know Karen had mentioned, and I don't know if you've heard of it or not. There's one disinfectant that targets PBFD. Is that correct? Have you heard about that?
Um, Not that I'm aware of. I've heard F10 is like the standard one that you're supposed to use, but I don't know
Right.
if there's another one. There could be definitely.
I'm going to look into that, and I'll put it in the comments if I do find that. Um,
Hmm.
So, yeah, Wendy said the last bird show she went to, people were going to multiple vendors holding birds, no hand sanitizing in between. Um, yeah, that's just that's like a horror movie for me. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, that's a lot. And everybody in the comments is saying, F10. So here Nick is saying that it's a bird mart versus a bird show, and I think he's right. So using the terminology and using it correctly, so we don't have any bird show folks out there who are angry. It's the A bird show is where birds are brought in, it's very organized. There's not a lot of selling. It's more of a competition and showing of birds, but not holding and grabbing and buying. And then a bird mart is where birds are just simply for sale. So yeah, so there is a difference, and I want to back that up before we get people upset with us. So Jen uses oxine. Okay. And Bella said chlorhexidine. But as far as general cleaning, I'm a fan of F10.
Hmm.
So I don't know. Um, but all right, this is, it's a scary topic, and I want to thank you, Dr. Anderson, for making it a little less scary because it's manageable. If you take the proper precautions going on the front end. So,
Hmm.
I want to thank you very much. If people have questions, they can put them in the comments. If they had questions that came up, after the fact, and we can, I'll send them to you if that's okay. I'll send the questions and maybe we
Hmm.
can, if I don't have the answer, we can get it from you. So thank you again. And hopefully we won't see, increase in this. We'll see, people taking the proper precautions. So thank you again for being a guest, and thank you guys for this was wonderful. Everybody was really interactive. Oh no, you did not. There's a comment here. I didn't mean to offend. I've never been to either a show or a mart. No offense whatsoever. And it's good that we clarified because there is a difference. And yeah, don't there was no offense taken. It's really tough to offend us here at the flock talk, I gotta say. So couple things I just need to announce. Don't forget to support the Rockstar Tour. We've added another facility, the Wasatch Avian Education Society. That's a mouthful in Utah. They're going to be on the tour. Next week, we are having Rockstar Trivia. And I know how competitive Lori McFarlane gets at trivia. Rachel, if you ever come across her in a trivia game, don't go for it. We are
Oh
going to
no.
be playing for the rescues. I will have a special guest on. All the answers are going to be on the Rockstar Rescue Tour page. So go follow that page and study hard, and you can help the rescues win some prizes and maybe win some prizes for your flock as well. So I hope everybody has a great week. We will see you next week. Thank you again, Dr. Anderson. I really appreciate your time and your specialty with exotics. So thank you. Have a great week.
Thank you, Robin, so much for having me on. And thank you for everyone that came and listened and supported. And stuff like this is awesome because, having access to education, talking about this stuff candidly, super, super helpful. And it's great to be here.
Thank you. Bye bye.